Hangout in the Holy Land, Land Grant Holy Lands podcast. This is the 6th episode, this one focusing on Ohio State basketball. It's that time of the year, folks. Ohio State football is done. No bowl game to look forward to, so it's pretty much down to just basketball, recruiting, and just, there's some attrition. There will be some feature additions coming to the team soon enough football-wise, and we'll certainly address some of that stuff. But nonetheless, I'm Luke Zimmermann, joined by Matt Brown, and we're going to talk about, Buckeye basketball. Not a lot of love out there from the internet scene, at least exclusively until things get juicy in conference, but there's a lot to watch right now, a lot to take in. This is setting the foundation for that success or those failures come March and come April. So now's the time to start paying attention. You have no football to divide your attention. You have no excuses. The basketball team had a game with UNC Asheville over this past weekend, a team that we most remember for having ginormous center Kenny George. But nonetheless, they came in this time with something else new and kind of gimmicky. They had the son of 80s rocker Bruce Hornsby, Keith Hornsby, who flat out could ball. I mean, the guy could really stroke the ball. I was a little impressed. I thought he might just be kind of more of a spot shooter, but he could create his own shot. He was their best player on the court easily. Kept Ohio State, on their toes, but the Buckeyes really pulled away, and it wasn't really close, but push came to shove.
Yeah, he couldn't get any help from his teammates. That first half, I think he was shooting something ridiculous, like 6 for 7. He buried 4 threes. He had a couple right after the break. It ended up with like 27, 28 points. But the other guard, I think, went 0 for 7. The other people on his team that were averaging around 8, 9, 10, 11 points a game were really completely shut down. I guess Ohio State was content to let Hornsby make it mandolin rain all over everything, and then take what you can get.
At the end of the day, though, the Buckeyes were just the better basketball team, and I guess that's just the way it is. But nonetheless, we saw a more diverse performance from this group. Aaron Craft is still in a bit of an offensive funk, and we'll certainly have to see if he can continue to make progress towards getting out of that. He opened the season so strong. I think that might have set our expectations a little maybe superficially high. Craft has always been a guy that's been more of a team-first defensive guy, not necessarily trying to get his, and he just happened to open the season really stroking it the first 2 games. Hasn't lived up to that hype since. Certainly the last couple games would certainly qualify as some kind of funk, or I wouldn't say a malaise. I don't think he's necessarily really forcing the issue. Duke was a bad shooting performance, shades of William Buford against Kentucky, but maybe not even that bad. But that was really that was a bad shooting performance. I don't think I'd necessarily call his performance as bad offensively the last 2 games. He's just been more taking his time and really choosing his shot a little bit more specifically, especially we saw it against Asheville. I'm not worried about Kraft, especially given how Evan Ravenel stepped up against UNC Asheville. Really showed that he had something offensively that maybe we really haven't seen for his entire career. I believe he tied a career high of, 12 points, 14 points?
Yeah, it was all in the first half. I think I saw him step away and hit like a 15-foot jumper, which I had no idea was possible. I mean, the first couple of baskets he was really, it was in transition, and he's just a big guy and could use his size advantage to get a prime position down low. But if he can actually make a mid-range jumper, those are going to be open with people driving, and that's just going to be a huge other dimension to Ohio State's offensive game. Absolutely,
and we talked last week about the emergence of LaQuinton Ross. He's really kind of, I guess this game he cooled off a little bit, but was still strong when he needed to be. They didn't have a necessity for him to just come out and stroke it. We know Deshaun Thomas is the unquestioned leader and artillery captain of this group, but turning back to the attention to Kraft, do you think that Kraft will break out of his offensive slump, or does he even need to?
I don't think that we should expect Kraft to be somebody who's going to come in and take 6 3-point shot attempts and bring in 15, 16 points a game. That's not really his strength, and I feel like if he's going to be focusing his attention there, that's going to be detracting away from the things which he does exceptionally well, which is provide top elite on-ball defense, making the other team's guards extremely uncomfortable and give up the ball before they want to, and setting up easy shots for the rest of Ohio State. If someone's going to give him an 8-footer, or if someone's going to open the lane and let him drive in for a layup, by all means take it. But I'm completely comfortable with Kraft only shooting a handful of times, and if we're going to be getting 6 to 10 points from him, as long as he's providing easy opportunities for the Ohio State's big men, or for easy shot opportunities for people like Ross, I think that's completely fine for OSU. We don't need him to be like the second points getter, bucket getter.
Certainly, yeah, I can certainly agree with a lot of those points. How about this? There's been kind of this weird trope, mindless line of thinking that maybe Shannon Scott is better than Aaron Kraft, because people have incredibly short memories. I mean, that's putting it in. That's That's selling the internet short, and the internet already has about a 15-second attention span.
Yeah.
But Shannon Scott was maybe a little bit more coveted of a recruit, and some people thought he'd be a little bit more prolific of a scorer than he's been. But he's shown flashes of everything in the last 2 games. Do you think these guys can peacefully coexist, or is this a potential point guard controversy waiting to happen? What do you think on that?
If you're somebody who doesn't want Aaron Kraft playing major minutes for your basketball team, like, you're not watching college basketball. Scott was awesome. In the last game, I think he had something ridiculous like 9 assists and like 6 steals, or some kind of crazy stat line, and he was great. And I like what he's able to do either with Kraft or when Kraft's not on the floor. But Kraft is there's only probably 2 or 3 people, if that, who are better individual on-the-ball defenders. And it's, given the importance of the point guard position and how many great point guards are in the Big Ten, if you have somebody who could potentially neutralize that guy, yeah, you want him on the court all the time. And even if there's somebody who might be a little bit better of a jump shooter or a little bit better at penetrating, that one strength, I think, alone it will justify keeping him on the court for 30 minutes. Like, if you don't want Aaron Kraft playing on the, like, I don't know what to say to you. Like, go watch Winthrop. It's crazy.
And that in the industry is what we call a segue. The Buckeyes host the Winthrop Eagles out of the Big South, a former quasi-perennial NCAA tournament team. A lot of folks will remember them because they upset Notre Dame in the 2007 NCAAs, and I think they also got some run. I think they beat not necessarily a top 10 ranked team, and I think that they played some folks tough in the 2010. They may have even beaten North Carolina in 2000 something. But nonetheless, this is a team that's just kind of been on the radar as far as mid-majors have gone. Greg Brandon, the now coach at Wichita State, who's really built them into a mid-major basketball factory, was there first, did a lot of good things for the Eagles before he left and was succeeded by, I believe, one of his assistants, Randy Peele, who was actually let go this last offseason. This has been a really interesting situation. Winthrop is not a world beater. They're a 4-4 team that was blown out by the best opponent they've played, which was VCU. But this is a team that, they're in the first year under new head coach Pat Kelsey. And Pat Kelsey was a former top assistant at Wake Forest under Skip Prosser. And after Skip Prosser, had just a sudden heart attack in his late 50s, way premature, just a heartbreaking tragedy for that entire community and the entire college basketball, I guess, brotherhood of coaches in general. Everyone loves Skip Prosser. He's a great, mentor to so many guys, and really, helped start a coaching tree that ultimately would, lead Thad Matta, Sean Miller, folks of that nature, and these guys all followed in the footsteps of Prosser. But I think the interesting thing about Kelsey is that he didn't handle it very well. He didn't, he tried to stay under Dino Gaudio, who'd ultimately be dismissed in favor of Jeff Bzdelik, but he left the industry before I think that was even the case. Kelsey decided to hang it up about 2.5 years ago. Just said that he took the death too hard and needed some time to reflect on it. But he got his mind right. He got everything in order that he needed to feel good about the profession again, and was able to land this Winthrop job. Which, as far as mid majors go, even though they are in the Big South, it's probably just given name recognition. There's certainly a lot. You could do a lot worse. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and so he's kind of rebounding. He's installing, Skip Prosser's system offensively and defensively. They haven't had a ton of success early, but they did just upset Ohio. Ohio also undergoing some coaching transition of their own. They lost John Groce, who's doing great stuff. Former Ohio State top assistant, now has Illinois off to a mercurial start, really rebuilding from the ashes of the Bruce Weber era. But, it's interesting to see Ohio went out and brought in TCU's coach, who hadn't been that accomplished in his last go in the MAC, and they get upset by Winthrop at home, 50-49. Interesting thing about that game is that Winthrop star player Derrick Henry had 4 opportunities to prospectively ice the game down the stretch at the free throw line. Missed 3 of the 4, but made the one that counted. I believe the Bobcats had the ball back with 4.7 seconds to go, and was unable to convert on their last field goal attempt. So while Brady Hoke was undoubtedly really confused that Ohio lost to Winthrop, and then Ohio plays Winthrop again in his world, it's going to be a strange world a strange worldview for him this coming weekend. But the Buckeyes can make it a chance to even the score in terms of Winthrop's record against states of Ohio state universities. And Henry's a guy we mentioned. He's probably their best scorer. I think he averages close to 16 points a game. They've got Andre Smith too, who's another good scoring guard. These guys aren't though they're not what we're used to, at least in terms of even Big Ten conference play or even some of the higher end mid majors. These are undersized guards. I think Henry is 6'3", 6'4", who's a little bit of a slasher, but not quite big enough to where he's going to be problematic for Linzel Smith or Aaron Kraft. Andre Smith is actually really small. He's a 5'10" guard. Not Allen Iverson, but maybe from that class, or at least wishes he was. And that's really like the depth of what they have in terms of scoring from the garbage. And they go about 3-4 deep at forward, but none of the guys are taller than 6'8". So that's what we're accustomed to seeing in non-conference play. I think the Buckeyes are going to really be able to have their way on both sides of the ball. I'd be surprised, honestly, if Winthrop was able to make this much of a contest. It just seems like the Buckeyes are hitting their stride at just the right time. It's turned into the Sam Thompson dunk show of late, too, which no complaints here. I certainly would love to see him add another dunk contest entry or two into his repertoire in garbage time against Winthrop. But, yeah, I mean, Winthrop only goes about 6 deep, too, in terms of scoring the ball. So not a good recipe to upset a team on the road in Value City Arena. And if Evan Ravenel is Evan Ravenel, they don't have anyone greater than 6'8" really in their rotation. It's going to be able to do anything against him or even Emmett Williams. So,
yeah, I think there's two things to watch for this game. One, I've read a couple of interesting quotes that seem to indicate that Ohio State might potentially be looking ahead to Kansas a little bit.
That makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to keep up that mental energy and intensity for these games that really aren't going to be close the entire time, and you don't need to necessarily play hard every minute in order to win by 15, 20 points. And so with this really big emotional game coming up against Kansas, who beat a really good OSU team twice last year, really frustrated Deshaun Thomas, it's going to be interesting to see if Mata's able to make sure everyone comes out with the right attention to detail and discipline throughout this entire game, or if there's going to be any lapses. The other thing that it seems silly to nitpick about this kind of thing, given the season we've had so far. I'm not really sure that Amir Williams has gotten better since I've seen him. I mean, he hasn't played a lot of extended minutes, but when he's been on the court, for someone who has such a definitive size advantage, especially over a lot of these undersized mid-major, low-major teams that we've been playing, to me, he seems like he's been consistently caught a little bit out of position with his footwork. His post moves or his offensive games, he's still extremely gangly, not really coordinated, not really able to utilize his gifts. And while I think we've seen a lot of the other younger Buckeyes really kind of improve from week to week, the mistakes that I saw yesterday were things that you could have seen in the second or third game. I really feel like we're going to need to have a really strong and deep front court to be able to compete with some of these really stronger sides in the Big Ten near the end of the year. So it's going to be interesting to see if he's able to come out and have the performance he's capable of against a team that I think we should be able to push around a little bit.
Yeah, the thing about Williams that I've just never really quite understood is that, it seems like he's a McDonald's All-American. He's got the body of work. Obviously, Thad Matta, Jeff Bowles, and those guys saw something in his tape in high school and his workouts that he was a good fit for them at the collegiate level. But he almost I don't know if it's that he doesn't try or if he legitimately has no ups. But the guy is 6'10", supposedly an athletic freak, and it just seems like at times he won't even just sky to get a basic rebound. It's a really weird phenomenon, but other times too, he does get the ball and make plays in the paint. We know it's not beyond him. I don't know if it's just an effort thing, if it's a conditioning thing. At least Ravenel is bringing it. I've said all season long that Ohio State needs at least something resembling about half to three-quarters of a valid big man. It could be a fractional thing, but if Ravenel can be that or better that, I mean, they're fine. And we've seen Trey McDonald get more and more minutes. I think you're right. I think that's more of almost an edict on Amir Williams' production than it is on anything Ravenel has done. So if Ohio State can get that 1.5 big man they need cumulatively, or even fraction of a big man, like I said, if the rest of the guards are playing their full potential, I think they'll be fine. Kansas, I know it's early. I don't want to dig too much into that, but we do have this game coming up, not at all that far away. Jeff Withey was a guy that super annoyed me in the last couple of matchups. He's a big guy, though, and we saw against Duke that was problematic. Is that going to be something that could be a matchup issue for the Buckeyes? I mean,
that's entirely possible. I think we've only really seen one team that had a dominant or really a substantially above average big guy. And that was at Duke, and that was the game Ohio State could have won, but certainly that was a bit of a matchup concern. I have to think that that's certainly something that's being addressed in practice right now, and how to be able to get consistency, and hopefully they will be ready in time for Kansas.
Yeah, and I guess the big concern is just that there's no more Jared Tillinger. There's not going to be that big physical presence to potentially offset a guy like that may even still have 3 or 4 inches on even somebody like that. But we digress. I think the Kansas game is going to be a heck of a battle for the Buckeyes, and it's really their last legitimate chance pre-conference for them to prove themselves for. They're basically playing for the selection committee now here in December. So we'll see what that necessarily means when push comes to shove. But let's take it one step at a time. We're already kind of in this transition overlooking Winthrop in a sense that we did talk about them quite a bit. Hopefully they don't do the same and really pay them one game at a time respects. Yeah. I'm not worried about that. That Maz never really, besides maybe conference play, had any instances where this was an issue, and they still usually win the majority of those games. So, I guess really the other thing that we're talking about kind of pre-show was, Butler beating Indiana in unexpected fashion. Not only did they win, they had two guys disqualified due to fouls, and they still were able to pull it out in overtime. And that was just
with the walk-on.
Yeah.
It's the most Butler thing ever, of course. Right? I mean, there's got to be this whole stable of undersized white guy walk-ons to come on for a big game for optimum Hollywood perspective. I mean, that's of course that's what happened. You have to be excited about that.
Yeah. Certainly, and it's just Indiana is a team that's really hard to like as a fellow member of the Big Ten from a basketball sense. So anytime they go down, and the number one team just in general, I mean, college basketball is all about the upsets, even more so than football. Football upsets are great too, but yeah, seeing Indiana fall the way they did, it also gives you a little bit of hope that if a team like Butler, who's fringe top 25, can get the best of Indiana. It was in Indianapolis, which it wasn't, I don't think, at Butler's home arena, but was still it's still an environment that had a lot of Indiana fans. It makes you wonder, well, not Heritage Hall or whatnot, it's still something that can linger in the back of the Buckeyes fans' minds. Like maybe this is a game that we can win even on the road against seemingly stacked odds. So that's definitely a net positive. I guess the last thing, Big Ten bowl season's coming up. Michigan had some guys suspended, including the famed mortified Michigan punter Will Hagerup. Yeah, he's gone. It's really his third suspension in like 2 years for a violation of team rules. You have to wonder. I mean, he was the best punter in the Big Ten this year, so maybe that's why they're not dismissing him outright. But
yeah,
they already had kind of a stacked deck against them facing South Carolina. It only gets harder. We've already talked about before how we're not very confident in this Big Ten slate of bowl games and their ability to really make any kind of dent. How about what Brett Bielema is doing, essentially hiring 90% of the Wisconsin staff to go to Arkansas? Like, are they going to have anybody left for the Rose Bowl?
No, but I mean, I mean, again, the Hollywood gods have already spoken. Now that Barry's come down, Wisconsin will win the only Big Ten bowl game, and ESPN
right.
There'll be a 30 for 30 documentary about it or something.
On it.
Like that's what's going to happen.
So there were also, not to cut you off too terribly much, there was also murmurs that maybe Alvarez would choose to stick around if he's too enamored by the coaching responsibilities of the Rose Bowl. You think that's a possibility? Or
I think the only way that happens is if Wisconsin looks around at the coaching landscape and realizes there's not going to be anybody really great available, and rather than hiring a B- or a B guy to hold right the ship for one more year and see if they can get a bigger name.
Yeah, I don't know if that would be Matt Campbell of Toledo. But there's been rumors that Dave Clawson of Bowling Green got an interview. But nonetheless, Alvarez is saying that they're going to hire a good guy, and he's waiting. So that might mean he's waiting for that team to play their bowl. I would, and the other rumor, I think footballscoop.com said that they think it's going to actually be an existing current head coach that they hire. So that'd be interesting. I don't know who that leaves. The Chris Peterson rumors, if they actually happen, which there's a lot of reason to doubt that, it seems like those were, if they'd happened, it's right up there with Arkansas's courtship of Brett Bielema in terms of secrecy. So hat tip to them, kudos for doing it, off the table. But yeah, I don't know at this point who they're going to get. If it was a super off the radar hire like a Dan Mullen or
I don't know, that would be fun. Dan Mullen, Urban Meyer.
Yeah, what's man, I'm trying to think what would even be like a feasible, like maybe unexpected but not impossible hire. Troy Calhoun,
maybe Northwestern's coach. I know.
That's the thing though. Like
Michigan tried really hard, and
Pat turned down overtures from Notre Dame as well. So if he was going to go anywhere, I don't know how. It was still maybe earlier in his coaching career than he is now. And you're right, Michigan was supposedly interested in him. He's a hot guy, but would he really go to another team in the Big Ten ranks for as bright as his stars in terms of coaching is? I got my doubts.
I don't know. I mean, the only other name that I've seen was Mel Thomas and from Jackson. Mel Tucker, excuse me. Yeah, Mel Tucker. And you know what? Like I don't think that'd be that good of a hire.
No, I've said this all along. Like
he's gonna get fired.
The Buckeye, beat aficionados or Buckeye blogosphere, whatever you want to call it, keep trumping Tucker just because he was an assistant on that national championship team in 2002, and that's great. And hey, that's awesome that he's connected to D'Antonio and Tressel. But the fact of the matter is that the guy hasn't recruited in college football in a decade. how dialed is he really to today's culture? He's been coaching in the NFL. And about the NFL, like I'm friends with some SB Nation bloggers that cover the Jaguars, Big Cat Country, and they speak highly of Tucker. But I've also, I'm a Houston Texans fan. I watch the AFC South. Tucker's defenses are terrible this year. The guy was also not a great head coach in the interim last year after they fired Jack Del Rio. So I don't know how you can, the guy has maybe 4 or 5 NFL games in which he was very suboptimal. And there's a defensive coordinator this year. He's got the 30th ranked defense in the NFL. That's really a guy you want to hedge your future on that hasn't recruited college football in a decade. Hey, Wisconsin, you want to hire him?
Yeah, go. Godspeed.
Yeah.
I don't know. There was a little bit of rumors around the Riley, the coach at Oregon State, but he's come out and said that he's not interested. I don't know if they're knocking doors in the Pac-12 to see if anybody's there, but not really a great time to be a Wisconsin Badger fan. I think their reign of terror over the past couple of years looks like it's probably going to be coming to a close, barring some coaching miracle.
To wrap things up, on a scale of 1 to 10, how trolly would a Tom Herman or Luke Fickell hire at Wisconsin be?
Oh, that big Luke Fickell to Wisconsin would be a 12. I wouldn't even be. I ain't even mad. I ain't even mad. Fickell, go for it.
Hey, I think it would be a really interesting scenario, so we'll have to see how it plays out. Anyway, joining me always, Matt Brown. I'm Luke Zimmermann. Hangout in the Holy Land, Episode 6, Ohio State basketball. We squeeze in a little football for good measure because we know how much people like football. See you next week. Go Buckeyes.